Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson and welcome to Microsoft Project Made Easy. In this series, we're looking at how to use Microsoft Project effectively. And so in this particular video, we're going to be talking about file naming protocols. What you'll find is in construction project management or any kind of project management, you really want to have a good record of what's happened on your project. And there's different ways of doing that in Microsoft Project. You can have multiple baselines and you can compare to multiple baselines. And I've done that in different videos and I'll leave links to those in the show notes so you can take a look at that. But I wanted to talk about a different way of tracking and being able to easily find what happened during specific periods of time on your project. So I'm typically looking at projects that are months in duration, where you're going to do a multitude of different updates. You know, in construction projects, we very often have projects that last a year or more. And very frequently we do a formal update once a month. We may do it even more frequently than that. And when we update, we often find that we have problems that occurred. We're delayed. And then we want to fix that, and we do recoveries. So we have to replan the work. So with all the updates and replanning, how do we keep a record of that so we can go back and we can see what actually occurred on the project? And we actually call this record that we keep the contemporaneous schedule, the as-built schedule for the project. Otherwise, you're just updating it all the time and you're updating this same project file and you haven't been really tracking what's occurred. It's not giving you great data that way. You might know where you're at, but you won't know the history of everything that occurred. So typically, and I'm just going to do this part fairly quickly just to give you an idea, you know, just to make sure new users just have a little bit of an idea. But as I said, if you go back and you look at some of my other videos on how to update and how to recover, you can get into the nuts and bolts of that. Right today, I just really want to kind of zoom in on the naming protocols. But just to be clear, when we're talking about a project update, we're talking about a date that we're updating the project to. So what is that specific date that we're updating the project to? And in this particular case, I've got an older file here. It says 2020, but we'll just take a look at this, that we're going to update it to a status date. So when you're updating a project file, just as I said, to be quick about this, you would look at your status date and you would update to that date. So you would say what's been done up to that date. And of course, you would have had to have saved the project as a baseline or set the baseline. And so to set the baseline, we just go to Project, Set Baseline. And that's taking a picture, a snapshot of what's occurred. And so now we can see we've got a baseline start and baseline finish date. So everything gets compared to this. We want to update the project schedule. So then we could go to our entry view. We could say, you know, this took 8 days and this took 5 days, and everything is done up to the status date. As I said, I'm just going to show you fairly quickly updating these things. So we just did some changes and we're going to update it to the status date. So I'm just going to quickly go to my status date. I've got already marked in there February 21st, 2020. So that would be coming up over here, that line here where I've inserted the status date for that line. If you don't know how to do that, again, I have that in my other videos, but very quickly you go to grid lines and you pull this line down, status date, and then you put in, you would like to see a solid line and red, and voila, it will show it to you as long as you put in this status date, the date you're updating your project to, and as long as you set the baseline. So I'm just going to click select all. I made those 2 duration changes. I'm going to say that other than that, everything else is on track. So I'm just going to click this little mark on track under the task tab box, and then that will update everything up to that status date. So we're not exactly the way we want it to be, because if I go to the variance screen, I can see we're 2 days behind schedule. Or if I want to look at the tracking Gantt, I could go to tracking Gantt and I could basically in the tracking Gantt screen, I could scroll to task. I can see what's going on with my project. I can see the bottom bar is the baseline and the top bar is what's actually going on, and this is the status date. You can sort of see where it's darkened in the red up to that point, and so we're 2 working days behind schedule. Great. So I've got that all done. Now what do I do with that? And so what I wanted to get into is, well, I would want to save that as a update for that particular status date. So if I'm looking at my status date, February 21st, 2020, I would want to save that file and just call it update. And then I'd want to be able to recall it and know that this is the update. And in this case, this would be the first update period. So this is for the basically the first month of work that transpired on the project up to this date. So I'm covering off these 4 weeks of work. So every month I would do an update, and that would tell me what's happened. But you know what? If I was behind schedule, I would also want to recover that time. And so to recover that time, that should be a different file. And my best bet would be to save this file under another name so that I would call it recovery. And that new recovery file becomes the file for your project. This is the file that your project, it's the new path that you plan for the project, making adjustments. You know, we all make a plan at the beginning, but we have to iterate that plan as we go. So as things occur, we have to adjust and we have to recover the time. Otherwise, it's quite useless, I think, scheduling software. The beauty of scheduling software is I have a plan and then monitoring it as we go and tweaking and adjusting things as we go. And in construction and in IT projects, things rarely go the way we planned. That's why we need to be able to pivot and iterate ourselves back on track. So what do I mean by file naming protocols? I just simply mean having some sort of method for naming your files that you can easily see where they are. They're in a folder. You can quickly access them. And in construction, we're always dealing with delays, and we've got to do analysis. Sometimes we've got to make claims, and we want to make those claims into change orders. We have to sell and negotiate all this kind of stuff. So we need to be able to have some sort of method that we track our data and our information, and we can look it up easily, and then we can sell it. We can negotiate it in our change order processes. So I just wanted to go over this and give you a realistic view of what the file naming protocols actually look like without spending too much time in doing this in Microsoft Project. I think I can clarify it pretty readily in the next few slides. We want to think about that each update is part of the contemporaneous record for the project, the as-built record for the project. We want to be able to access what happened at different points. It gives us great historical data, great historical record of what occurred, and we can separate what was an update and what was a recovery. So what happened, and then what did we plan to do about it? And then you'll see month by month, you can get a nice even flow of how the project went. What were some of the issues with it? And then you've got really good data. If there's claims that hopefully don't get to litigation, that get changed over to change orders and signed off really easily because you've got some good data that you can negotiate much better with your clients that way and the consultants that you're working with. Really, it's about effectively monitoring and managing your projects on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month level and being able to access information and know this is what happened during this period of time without it being too long a period of time. That way it's really good data. So if we take a look at this, we can sort of break it down that you would have, you know, say you have a 12-month project, you might have monthly updates, formal monthly updates that you provide to the client so they know what's going on and they have some confidence in the work that you're doing, right? That's what you're trying to get across. And if there's some issues, you're discussing them as they're occurring. You're not letting things pile up that way. So we would have this naming process. So your first update might be March 5th, 2022, and that might be after a month of work has occurred. And so you'd be in that update saying what's done. And if you're behind, you would see what's the variance, like I just showed you in that brief sort of example just prior to this. Then, of course, if you're behind, what you should do is you just take that file and you named it based on this was the first update. You have some sort of job name. Everybody has a job name for accounting purposes that they can track their projects. And then you've called it either by project or by client or by address, some sort of name. And now you want to clarify, this is a key word here, update. And what was the date? So what was the status date that we did that update on, like I just showed you in Microsoft Project? All right, so you updated and you're behind schedule. Well, you know what? If you're behind schedule, now you should do a recovery. It's a revision of how will you get yourself back on track. And so what are the ideas? What are the ways that you'll do this? And we've talked about this in other videos as well, and I'll provide you links in the description below, as I mentioned. But all we're doing here is the only thing we're changing, we're going File, Save As, and we're changing this one word from update to recovery. Everything else stays the same. Pretty easy, right? Easy to do that. Now we've got the update, now we've got the recovery. And if I was using Microsoft Word to do a narrative's like your statement or executive summary of what happened in the last month. Should very clearly say whether you're ahead or behind, why were you delayed, how many bad weather days, if it's a construction project occurred, these types of things in the narrative. But again, now it's going to be all in the same folder, easy to access, and they're all based on the same numbers. If I wanted to open up the 3 of them at that time, I could see that. Because don't forget, you've got a 12-month project, right? That's over a long period of time. It's nice to be able to access just different components to look at and review different things. So the next month, okay, well, I've got another update. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file, which was my new plan, essentially. That's my recovery file, how we're getting ourselves back on track. And then I'm going to just rename it. I'm going to change this to number 2, and I'm going to change this to update, and I'm going to put the next month's date that I put as my status date in there. And that will be my update. And I'm going to say what happened. Maybe this went exactly the way we planned. Maybe it didn't. If it didn't, that's fine. We would be able to state what didn't occur. In this case, we'll say we're still on track. So it did work with that recovery plan. And we would update things as being done on this particular file. We would do our narratives for that. When you're on time, they're fun to make out because it's like, this went well, we're on track. Pretty easy to do. Then another month goes by. That's construction projects. That's any type of project, week to week, month to month, time goes by. What happened? Why did it happen? You're learning from this as well. So number 3, update May 5th, recovery. All right, so this one was behind. You're doing a recovery this time, so you would have a recovery file. But all you're changing in this case is the update to recovery. And then you're putting in how would you get the time back? Like you're changing Microsoft Project for the best way to get it back. I call that the direct method that I use in getting it back. You're looking along the critical path. You're looking sooner rather than later. You're trying to reduce, look for the no-cost solution. You're experimenting. You're communicating and getting commitment. And if you do all that, it's going to be good for the team. But this is controlling the data for you, right? Then you'd fill out a narrative. So we've got another step on the process. Keeps going. Change order. We haven't talked about that. You have change orders. So you should have a separate file to show the impact of the change order. And you might be reviewing that. You might be putting that as part of your change order documentation to show the impact and why you've got to charge premium time because of the impact it's having on the project. So you got this nice file naming protocol, and you would keep going with that. You might end up with 36 or 40 files on a 12-month project as an example, but you could easily go through every one at any point in time. You could certainly look at the last one and see how did you do compared to the original baseline, because you got the baseline in the project, but you wouldn't know all the different things that occurred along the way. This allows you to actually follow the contemporaneous, the as-built schedule from start to finish on the project. So I kind of just sort of highlighted the same thing out over here, just showing you the different numbers and how that flows in and what you should be thinking about. Again, that would be your first update. This would be your job name or job number, the actual name of the project or address, and then the type. And again, you might even have other ones like CCO, contemplated change order, if you're checking it to see what is the impact of that. And you can keep them all together, and then it's great. It's easy to find, easy to follow, and easy to use. And key, this would be in your folder. This is just a screenshot from a folder in Explorer, right? And so as long as I've sorted it by basically by number, so it'll start 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and it'll go all the way down to 12 for my 12 months. And they'd be all nice order. I could check any particular date that's following in the dates in that order. Very easy to track, very easy to find. And that is got a lot of benefits to it as compared to trying to track baselines and baseline names within project. If it's a very short project, you could do that, I would say, but I would do it this way for most projects. That way you've got great data, great way of following it. So hopefully that gave you some good ideas for file naming protocol. Remember, you don't have to make it exactly like this, but if you've got some sort of process and you just follow it and this is your standard for how you organize things, it just makes life a lot easier. Why not make it effortless, our project management processes? So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope you subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can check out the playlists on Microsoft Project. I also do project management, construction business management videos, and click the notifications so you can see them as they come up. So this is Tom Stephenson wishing you a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.